Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear EAA members. Welcome to the opening ceremony of the 27th annual meeting of the European Association of Archaeologists. My name is Angelika Hoffmann. I'm from the organizing team of this year's meeting. Now, looking at the almost empty seats in front of me, I must say it's a shame we can't have you here in Kiel, and we really would have loved to welcome you. But, well, things are as they are, and I think whether on site or in the virtual room, the meeting will be just as inspiring and fruitful as in the years before. Now, the virtual meeting means that lots of the work which was intended to be done here in Kiel has passed to the EAA office in Prague. So I really like to take the opportunity and express my thanks to Sylvie and Katka and Christina and their staff in Prague. They really did a great job, and they contribute substantially to the successful meeting. And with these words, I'd like to hand over to the President of the European Association of Archaeologists, Felipe Criado-Boado.
Thank you, Angelika. I thank you for the music. That is important because it makes present all of those that today are not with us. Dear members, dear colleagues, dear friends, in spite that the speakers of this opening ceremony are here together in Kiel, we all the entire EAA, is again in the virtual space. For the second time, our annual meeting is held virtually. To get here has been a great effort once again, a great effort of many persons and the entire organization. So far as I know, the annual meeting is running well and smoothly, but we all miss the chance. We all meet the chance to be here in person with our Kiel colleagues. Sadly, this megalith, what is just standing outside the conference hall where we are now, remains alone instead of being the meeting point that it was in the past and that we all were expecting to be again for us now in its future. In spite of these problems, the great achievement to start and celebrate is that our 2021 annual meeting in Kiel, performed virtually, has engaged almost 2,600 participants. This is a full record in itself. We are 600 more than last year in our first virtual annual meeting. Our happiness makes more necessary, once again as usual, to remember those dear members, dear friends and colleagues who passed away in the last year. John Coles, Jan Busek, Stanislaus Tabaczynski, Stanislaus Terna, Edwin Neustumny, Don Hisson, and Judy Roberts, so far as we know. We are here for widening horizons, as the motto of the meeting remembers. When our 21 motto was chosen, nobody could predict that it would be now so very timely and appropriated. But we, as archaeologists, always know that the future cannot be gained without effort in the present to think and act otherwise. Thanks to this awareness that is particularly true in the current pandemic context, we are actually widening horizons here from Kiel. Let me give you some example of what the meeting and the EAA is doing to widen our horizons. We are presenting this Friday a new strategic plan for the next year of the EAA. Its definition was mainly led by our new president, Esther Banfi. The strategic plans provides also new avenues to bolster EAA internal life, also its external projections. It provides new avenues to mobilize our collective intelligence, so through EAA communities, committees, and some other new mechanism, you will see. We are also presenting for adoption by our year annual meeting, business meeting, a new annual statement that this year is devoted to archaeology and climate change. Moreover, we are proud to have been an umbrella for the celebration of the first international summit on social archaeology of climate change, an event led by Johannes Müller and Peter Bill, and seconded by more than 60 archaeologists from all over the world. Actually, this summit also remembers us the big challenge that is for archaeology to try to fight for making archaeology more relevant in the present and in our societies. Archaeology should make part, a greater part of all the important current debates in our societies and polities, and we are not doing. For some reason, archaeology is still pretty behind on this sort of discussions, while other specialists and disciplines are taking their chance. This should be a great challenge for archaeology in the future. Last but not least, our horizons are widening, and this is very happy for me to say, with our new president, Esther Banfi, who will take position this Friday at the end, almost at the end, a bit before actually, of the annual members' business meeting. It is a special pleasure for me to leave this responsibility now, that it has been an honor to assume for serving you all and for taking care of the EAA. But it's now a really great pleasure to leave this responsibility in the wise hands of Esther. Now, I leave the place to our new president in a few days from now. All in all, even at the times of the new normal, our prison as organization is quite promising. No nonetheless the problems everywhere around. The pandemic, the climate change, and the increasing social injustice. For this, because our present and perhaps future is still quite promising, credit must be given to those who made this event possible. This implies particularly Johannes Müller as chair of the scientific committee, but more in general implies also the Institute for Prehistory and Protohistory here in Kiel University. In not many other places, I must tell, it's possible to find such a positive and provoking conjunction of archaeological theory, scientific archaeology, and landscape studies with together awareness of current social problems, social archaeology, and anthropological-based research. I guess we will get a good example of this later on with the keynote lecture that completes and closes this opening ceremony. For this, Kiel University, represented here, but its president, must be also acknowledged for hosting an institute as this, and also for hosting us. For this reason, I want to thank deeply to Simone Fulda, the president of the university, who will speak later. Besides Johannes, the local organizing committee must be acknowledged for the wonderful work they did. Angelica Hoffmann, Annalena Pfizer, and Hendrik Rassi. Besides the people here in Kiel, once again we have to recognize the substantial work played by our secretariat. Look please at this image. It's the way as our secretariat depicted themselves in the presentation that you can find in the EAA stand of the virtual fair. They are presenting themselves saying, me, who takes care of. Let me guess that most of the men would have presented otherwise, perhaps saying, me in charge of, or me responsible for. But it is to take care what matters. This is what our secretary does for us, and it is what the entire EAA should do for members and for archaeology. To take care is a good, simple abstract of what EAA does. Perhaps actually could be a good motto for a future meeting. Thus, I will finish just with a toast, with a virtual toast, to take care of everything that is memorable and important for us as archaeologists, as citizens, as community. Thank you so much, and keep engaged, please, dear members.
Thank you very much, Felipe. May I now present the Minister of Science, Education and Cultural Affairs of the Federal State of Schleswig-Holstein, Mrs. Karin Prier. Mrs. Prier will join us by video.
Dear Professor Criado-Boado, dear Professor Fulda, dear Professor Müller, dear members of the organizing and scientific committees, dear participants. I'm very pleased to welcome you all to the 27th annual meeting of the European Association of Archaeologists. Just imagine how great it would have been if I could have welcomed you personally here in Schleswig-Holstein in Kiel. After all, this year's motto of your annual meeting is widening horizons. So it fits perfectly with the land between the North Sea and the Baltic Sea. Yet I'm happy that technology makes it possible to host such an ambitious major event virtually, even more for those of you who might not have been able to attend here otherwise. So I would like to sincerely thank those of you who have been involved in the organization of this great event for your extraordinary commitment. Of course, I would also like to thank the members of the Christian-Albrechts-Universität in Kiel and the Johanna Mestorf Academy, as they are this year's hosts. Widening horizons. This describes a basic scientific trait, or in other words, it is a metaphor for the inexhaustible human ability to strive for new insights and change perspectives. This becomes particularly vivid in archaeology, for example, when our image of the past is constantly expanded and again is corrected by new finds. Archaeology has a strong connection to cultural life, lore and symbols. It is firmly anchored here in Schleswig-Holstein, and fortunately, it now is one of our research priorities. For the last 15 years, the state of Schleswig-Holstein has succeeded in intensively expanding its archaeological competencies and cooperation potentials together with the Christian-Albrechts-Universität Kiel and strong non-university partners like, for example, the Center for Baltic and Scandinavian Archaeology or the Archaeological Museum Schloss Gottorf. Therefore, we could carry out our excellent archaeological research projects such as the Excellence Cluster, Roots, Social, Environmental and Cultural Connectivity in Past Societies. The state government of Schleswig-Holstein has already supported this to the best of its ability and will continue to do so in the future. Widening horizons. That has already been true for the name giver of the Johanna Mestorf Academy. Johanna Mestorf played an important role in initiating social change in Germany. Unusual for the time, she became the director of the Museum of Patriotic Antiquities in 1891, and in 1899 she was awarded the title of a honorary professor by the University of Kiel as the first woman in that was then Prussia. Archaeology makes an important contribution to our society until today, for example, when investigating the interplay of human societies, their influences on nature and environmental conditions over long periods of time. This is the reason why the archaeological scientific horizon needs further development. Methodological, technological and interdisciplinary potentials must be brought together in the best possible way. It also reaches far beyond the national horizon, as this Congress demonstrates impressively. In the past, today and in the future, significant human and social relations always have held and will always hold on an international perspective. I wish you all that this event will successfully stay on course towards new horizons in archaeology and international cooperation, that it will be contributing to an intensive professional exchange, and it will lay the best possible foundation for the future exciting research projects and collaborations. I hope you will have a deep and fruitful professional exchange. Good luck and thanks a lot.
Very much. Please listen now to the President of Kiel University, Mrs. Simone Fulda.
Dear Professor Criado-Boado, dear Professor Banfi, dear Professor Müller, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. As president of Kiel University, it's my great pleasure to very warmly welcome you to this very important conference throughout Europe, in Asia, or in America. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it's unfortunately not possible to meet in person. Just a few people are here in the lecture hall. It's also really sad that we cannot warmly welcome you to our very nice city here at Kiel. And it would have been a pleasure to also introduce to the Kiel maritime flair. The theme of this conference, Widening Horizons, goes hand in hand with the claim of the federal state of Schleswig-Holstein. The land of horizons, situated between the North and the Baltic Sea, offers plenty of opportunities for free and inspiring views of water and land. Widening horizons represents also a vital component of our university's identity. As the only comprehensive university in the state of Schleswig-Holstein, our university also strives for new horizons and for new ideas which are looking in the future. We connect disciplines, we pose no questions, and we build bridges between science of different disciplines and also between science and society. Jointly, we generate new knowledge and find urgent solutions for very important questions, for example, to address grand challenges such as the climate crisis. And to this end, it is also very important to mention that we had a conference just a few days ago, the first summit on social archaeology and climate change. And at this conference, this was a new forum for the contribution of archaeology also to current grand challenges such as the climate crisis. And I think this conference and this summit very nicely illustrated that archaeology is also addressing very important current themes and the topicality and innovative potential of this field of research. And archaeology research has a lighthouse character also for the profile and the strategy of our university. And I would like to highlight that the international impact of this field of research goes far beyond the university, the state of Schleswig-Holstein in Germany. It's really kind of an international impact. Over the last 15 years, archaeology in research, education, and technology transfer has become a very important nucleus of innovative scientific approaches and topics at our university, as highlighted, for example, by the Cluster of Excellence Roots, social, environment, and cultural connectivity in past society. Finally, I would like to thank you, dear Professor Müller, for bringing this very important conference to Kiel. And also I would like to thank all the members of the team, for example, just as one member, Angelika Hoffmann, for one of the local committee organizing the local part in an excellent manner. And now I wish you a very exciting and inspiring conference. Thank you very much.
The Speaker of the Scientific Committee of the Kiel Annual Meeting, Johannes Müller.
Yeah, dear Presidents, so dear Simone Fulda, dear Felipe, dear Esther, dear colleagues, With extraordinary speed, the world, science, and archaeologists are experiencing dramatic changes in times of climate and social change. Within our disciplines, in addition to the advancements of new methods, new forms of communication, and new threats to archaeological heritage, structures and formats are emerging, which are accelerated by the experience of a worldwide pandemic. The challenges of our modern societies are becoming all the more apparent. For example, the environmental crisis, increasing inequality, and the potential of conflict, to name but a few aspects. Especially in times such as these, the reflection of human behavior from distant and far distant times is important for the self-assurance of human existence. In this context, archaeology makes important contributions to the interpretation of recent cultural changes and provides crucial data for strategy development of our modern societies. Widening horizons, the motto of this year's annual meeting, stands for both what is happening and what is necessary to fulfill our social duty, the departure to new horizons. For this EAA conference in Kiel, the scientific board had identified various topics to meet the task to structure the discourse on widening horizons. 7 themes were identified to guide the many contributions: widening horizons through human-environmental interconnections, and pandemic and climate change, responses to global challenges, locate connectivity and transformations in the socio-environmental context of the past, which continue to be relevant in the present. We know, especially from the experiences of the last decade, how strikingly the disruption of social connectivity or the destruction of the environment becomes a danger. The new challenges for the preservation of cultural heritage and the presentation of the past to the public are addressed in the topics on the new normality of heritage management and museums in post-COVID times and globalization and archaeology. 2 further themes, assembling archaeological theory and the archaeological sciences and material culture studies and societies, discuss the extraordinary progress in archaeological methodology, which not only makes complete new archives accessible for research, but above all requires new theoretical foundations to interpret the new data. This is exemplified in the theme from global to local Baltic-Pontic studies. Investigations are brought together for a part of Europe where, since Paleolithic times, connectivity between diverse societies and their environments have always led to significant innovations. Kiel, as the venue of the EAA Conference 2021, stands symbolically for widening horizons by integrating natural and life sciences into archaeology, by incorporating the most diverse horizons between East, West, North, and South, and by developing new research centers that build on proven examples. Thus, here at the university, in addition to the center Roots, Social, Environmental, and Social Connectivity in Past Society, and the other scales of transformations, human-environmental interaction in prehistoric and archaic society, a variety of European collaborations on important challenges of contemporary societies have been organized. The Center of Scandinavian Archaeology in Schleswig and the World Heritage Site Hedeby form the crucial bridge to the north. Widening horizons. Already now we can recognize various aspects that seem important for the problems of our world today. I would like to pick out just 3 here. First, isotope and ADNA analysis which have become standard in many fields, prove for our archaeological periods that even in sedentary societies, so since about 12,000 years ago, between 10 to 30% of the population was mobile in most cases. We can therefore modify our modern definition of sedentism. Mobilities, migrations, and emigrations are part of the basic pattern of the human society. In the political dimension, this is of course a message for open borders or a world without borders. Even if this may seem illusory, problem solving requires courage. Especially from an archaeological and historical perspective, we know that crisis situations, including the current ones, offer opportunities for change, not only for a borderless Europe, but also for a world without borders. Second, in the ADNA analysis mentioned above, as in biomarker analysis, there has been an accelerated technical progress in methods. We can also observe this in the archaeological interpretation. No less than 5 years ago, supra-regional migration movements were reconstructed by archaeology, seamlessly following the old clash of cultures. An inflation of terms such as extinction, migration, and warfare set in without reflecting the numerous forms of mobility and the diversity of transformation processes. Today, this seems to be a thing of the past. The new development of methods has led to genetic aspects such as admixture or the diversity of genetic fingerprints of the Y chromosome, for example, that are linked with integration, diversification, and the opening of networks. Here too, we undoubtedly recognize not only the political relevance, but also the danger of the current political discussion of our archaeological outcomes. Third, widening horizons from a cultural anthropological point of view, we archaeologists have taken up numerous positions in recent years on questions of identity, cultural phenomena, etc. It is precisely the placing of ethno-archaeological perspectives in the discourse that proves how complex and changeable, how fluid identities are in archaeological research societies. Social identity is produced by the culturally constituted human being, and I think we have to take care about this. One of the special features of the Kiel EAA is this year's EAA Declaration on Climate Change, which will hopefully be adopted at the General Assemblage the next days. Already, the first International Archaeological Climate Summit, SAC, was with experts from Japan to California and from South Africa to Scandinavia, took place on Monday under the umbrella of the EAA. The SAC summit stated, and I quote, all previously mentioned topics, social inequality, resource management, food security, mobility, conflict, have major consequences for human health. Archaeologists have demonstrated that the circumstances surrounding competition over resources, reduced mobility, living under siege conditions, and malnutrition also contribute to the increasing fragility of immune systems. In turn, human societies become more vulnerable to both chronic diseases and acute epidemics. I quote again, finally, most of the prehistoric and historic studies conducted by archaeologists have shown that climate change, natural catastrophes, pandemics did not leave people helpless, but they actively and creatively tried to find solutions. Even when concerted efforts sometimes failed, gained trust in the capability of societies facing changes could be bolstered by archaeology. The Kiel EAA, and this is perhaps more important, the Kiel EAA would not have been possible without the excellent work of Angelika Hoffmann, Annalena Pfeiffer, and Hendrik Reese from the local organization team, to whom we extend our sincere thanks. Of course, it would not have been possible without the great commitment of EAA's Prague office, without the cooperation of numerous colleagues on the scientific committee, and without the support of Kiel University. We would like to thank Simone Fulda on behalf of the latter. It would also not have been possible without the opportunity to work so beautifully with Felipe and Esther, who are clearly a treasure for the entire EAA. The Kiel annual meeting 2021 had to go virtual again, what is a pity for the local organization, the university, and the cross-regional on-site participation. But at the time, going virtual has facilitated new forms of participation and communication, which also makes the annual meeting more inclusive. The scientific committee had to develop a scientific program for the second highest numbers of papers handed in within the history of the EAA in spite of the pandemics from about 70 countries. Thus, widening horizons is not only necessary, but possible, and that's up to you. And we have to take care about it to cite Felipe and the Prague office. And in this sense, thanks to all of you.
Now, before we continue with the award ceremony of this year's annual meeting, we will again have the pleasure to listen to Mark Korschai, who you already heard in the beginning. This time, Mark will play for us the Notturno Opus 55, number 4 by Edward Grieg. Thank you very much, Mark. We will now continue with the award ceremony of this year's meeting.
Dear colleagues and friends of the European Association of Archaeologists, for me this is the final but very welcome occasion of introducing the winners of our association's European Heritage Prize. Together with Kathleen Wallach, who is also at the end of her term as a member of the European Heritage Prize Committee, I would like to thank the EAA for giving us the honor of rewarding so many people and institutions. Their ideas and action have contributed to making us increasingly aware of the value of cultural heritage as a tool for building knowledge, growth, inclusion, development, and participation. This year, we received many nominations, 15 in the individual category, 11 in the institutional category. Overall, they were all of the very high standard, and they covered a wide range of fields of interest and activity by the persons and institutions nominated. I now would like to turn to presenting the winners. First, the institutional category. This year, the committee decided to award an ex aequo prize to 2 different institutions and an honorary mention for a third institution. The 2 winning projects have similar objectives, but are of a very different nature. One is the result of the activity of a public institution, which has the task of protecting the archaeological heritage of a city, and which tries to give it back by making the accumulated knowledge available to citizens in a number of innovative ways. The other arises from a group of citizens who, convinced of the social value of the cultural heritage of the place where they live, are becoming informed and find ways of fighting for its preservation. The 2021 European Heritage Prize institutional category of the European Association of Archaeologists goes to the Pitropipoliton Hierapetras, Crete, Ellada, Citizens Committee of Hierapetra, Crete, Greece, and to SITAR, Sistema Informativo Territoriale Archeologico di Roma, Rome Archaeological Geographic Information System, Italy. The honorary mention goes to West Dunbartonshire Council for its Rediscovering the Antonine Wall project, which is designed to increase awareness and understanding of this monument across numerous different communities, including some of the most economically and socially deprived in the country. I will now read the laudatios of the winners. Hierapetra. The construction of wind power facilities can have a devastating impact on the archaeological landscape. In seeking to prevent the destruction of sites and monuments, joint action is required by those institutions that have the task of protecting the cultural heritage and by those citizens who care about the protection of the place where they live and who recognize its historical complexity and cultural wealth. The island of Crete, as well as being the place that gave rise to the myth of a Europe that unites different cultures and experiences, is also a region rich in important archaeological evidence. The Citizens Committee of the city of Yarapetra, located on the southeastern coast of the island, has a long history of conserving its cultural and natural heritage. Over the last few years, the committee has engaged in a difficult fight against the destruction of a historic landscape, which includes a large archaeological area. This popular campaign to save the historical evidence present in the local landscape have mobilized a sense of community, the direct participation of citizens, and the commitment of local and foreign experts, and has led to the organization of public meetings, conferences, seminars, workshops, and excursions in the affected landscape. This was all done on a voluntary basis and without any external funding. The committee has demonstrated what it means to be a resilient community in a country that has been devastated by economic crisis, the collapse of tourism, and the pressure of major economic interests. It is for having demonstrated the real value of active civic participation in safeguarding their own cultural and natural heritage that the Citizens Committee of Yarapetra is awarded the 2021 Institutional European Heritage Prize of the European Association of Archaeologists. CITAR. The city of Rome is an enormous open-air museum in which the monuments that bear witness to the splendor of its Roman, Renaissance, and modern culture coexist in a complex and often conflictual relationship with today's city. The protection, management, and dissemination of data concerning the heritage of this enormous urban and suburban archaeological reality are fundamental to guaranteeing the successful coexistence of the ancient with the contemporary. This task presupposes that this deep scientific knowledge is made accessible not only to a specialized public, but also to ordinary citizens and to all other stakeholders. CITAR, Rome Archaeological Geographical Information System, is a public and open archaeology project promoted and led by the Special Superintendency for Archaeology, Fine Arts and Landscape of Rome. It consists of a shared digital archive, a management system for the enormous quantity of data derived from archaeological research conducted in the territory of Rome, and it guarantees the availability, visibility, and dissemination of the data so it can be used in an informed way. CITAR is a meeting and mediation point between government, citizens, and other users aimed at raising awareness of the cultural importance and social value of the urban and suburban landscape of the city of Rome. This can be made usable and habitable only through a shared vision about the opportunities for social development, while also considering the risks of their preservation. For its work in democratizing Rome's cultural heritage through policies of sharing and social participation, to ensure that the archaeological heritage is perceived as a living element of the urban landscape and not as an obstacle to development, the 2021 Institutional European Heritage Prize of the European Association of Archaeologists is awarded to the CITAR project.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to all and very single member of the European Association of Archaeologists, and especially to the Evaluation Committee for the award given to the CITER project. Taking part of this important award ceremony also on behalf of Superintendente Daniela Porro has a very special meaning because today we see recognized more than 10 years of work in the service of Rome's cultural heritage. All of this would not have been possible without close-knit team, which I had the honor of leading. My heartfelt thanks go to all them. Thanks are due to superintendenti who wanted to support the project. And finally, thanks to all my colleagues and to the many institutions that have collaborated with the CITER project. I am grateful and honored to receive this award, which identifies CITER as a tool at the service of the community, able to freely offer archaeological context and knowledge, but above all as a tool to implement social participation and sharing policies of the themes of protection and conservation of our heritage. Archaeological assets such as the heritage of memory, the language and the history of a people play a fundamental civic role and are an integral part of identity of a nation. Their free dissemination and use is important for the relationship of citizens with their territories and, above all, in the light of the current process of integration for the relationship between nations, to help acquire an ever stronger European identity. Thank you.
In the individual category, the committee decided to award one nomination and one honorary mention. The 2021 European Heritage Prize individual category of the European Association of Archaeologists goes to Laura Jane Smith, who has played a seminal role in the development of critical heritage studies. The honorary mention goes to Rachel Kiddy for the importance of her work with marginalized communities, homeless, migrants and refugees. I shall now move on to reading the laudatio for the individual category. Critical heritage studies is a very important field of interest that promotes the idea of heritage as a relational, social, and substantially political phenomenon. Laura Jane Smith has played a pioneering role in critical heritage studies and made innovative and fundamental contributions to research in this field, turning her interest to heritage as a performative practice. This has led us to go beyond simple questions related to the conservation and management of heritage, and instead to question its use and sometimes abuse by segments of society, and its reformulation in order to claim new meanings for the past and to propose new visions for the future. Through the exercise of hegemony over heritage, what Laura Jane Smith labeled the authorized heritage discourse, social groups and entire communities are being discriminated against, marginalized and even excluded from the official recognition of heritage. More recently, Laura Jane Smith has investigated the role of emotions in the approach to heritage, and she has worked with indigenous, female and Afro-Caribbean communities, as well as industrial and working class heritage. In addition to her research activity, Laura Jane Smith has also played a fundamental role in creating a new network of scholars and activists in the field of heritage, founding the Association of Critical Heritage Studies, to which she has brought her commitment and her undisputed leadership, and going on to edit the high-profile International Journal of Heritage Studies. For having created the foundation for a new approach to research and dissemination of cultural heritage, for her fundamental and lasting contribution to the development of critical heritage studies, and for having founded the Association of Critical Heritage Studies, Laura Jane Smith is awarded the 2021 Individual European Heritage Prize of the European Association of Archaeologists.
Hi, this is Laura Jane from Canberra, Australia, where it's currently winter and where we are once again in lockdown due to the re-emergence of the Delta strain. I am, however, really honoured to have been awarded the European Archaeological Heritage Prize. It means a lot to me, and I really appreciate the recognition and the privilege of receiving this prize. That the European Association of Archaeologists is supporting work in heritage, I think is very important. When I started working as an archaeologist in the mid-1980s, heritage was seen as, and I'm quoting here, something you do when you can't get a real job in archaeology. The work that the European Association of Archaeologists is doing in supporting heritage work, both in the academy and in the professional workplace, is very important and appreciated. Thank you again for this honour, and I wish you all a very, very good conference and annual meeting, and that wherever you all are, that you are safe and well. Thank you again.
It's been a tough year for all of us, especially students, so the EAA Selection Committee would particularly like to commend all the 20 applicants for this year's EAA Student Prize. After much discussion, we've decided to award this year's prize to Karin O'Toole for her paper, Bog Butter in Ireland, A Study Through Time and Space. COVID has shaken the world in the last 18 months, and archaeology has been strongly affected along a number of different axes. Students in particular have suffered from lack of access to resources, reduced mobility, and difficulties in launching or carrying out planned fieldwork. In her paper, Bog Butter in Ireland, A Study Through Time and Space, Karin O'Toole faces these challenges with grace and ingenuity and manages to use them to launch a creative new study into a well-known, but perhaps not always well-recorded, archaeological find type. O'Toole presents a pilot study of bog butter deposition in 6 Irish counties, which was both a workaround developed to test the quality and affordances of legacy data when museums were not accessible, and also an initial attempt to situate bog butter within the larger corpus of Irish bog finds, alongside a range of other artifacts from different periods. Through a series of GIS analyses, she explores some of the limitations of the modern data, including various taphonomic processes that may create patterns subsequent to deposition events. O'Toole's research highlights how common bog butter deposition must have been in the past from prehistory to the 19th century, and this provides a useful jumping-off point for her own doctoral research. But it's also a good reminder to the rest of us that many of our most remarkable finds were just ordinary parts of past people's everyday lives. We congratulate Karin O'Toole and look forward to the publication of her paper.
Hi everyone, I am delighted to accept the EAA Student Award, and I wish to thank the selection panel and the Senior Manager Sylvie for their time and consideration. Their positive response and kind words mean a lot. My thanks also to the sponsors of the award for their generosity too. My research as a whole aims to tackle key questions relating to bog butter and its deposition in Ireland by systematically quantifying, characterising, dating, locating and analysing these objects. Mine is also the first project to target the entire bog butter assemblage rather than individual butters or smaller subsets of the wider assemblage. The pilot study I've presented to the EAA marks the first key steps towards achieving this goal. There are many people that I wish to thank for their support and advice, but I will try to keep it short. Firstly, I wish to thank the Irish Research Council. Without their financial support, this research would not be possible. Secondly, I'd like to thank my supervisor, Dr. Jessica Smith, my research studies panel, Dr. Neil Carolyn of UCD and Isabella Mulhall of the National Museum of Ireland, and the School of Archaeology at UCD for their immense support that I've received from them, not just in the course of my PhD, but since I first arrived at UCD in 2014. Last but not least, I want to thank my family and my partner. PhD students aren't always the easiest to live with, even more so during a pandemic, and their support is truly appreciated. Thanks, guys.
Hello, my name is Peter Biel, and I'm the chair of the Oscar Mentelius Foundation. And together with my fellow trustees, Ellen Dahlin and Margaret Gowan, we have decided to award the first Early Career Achievement Prize of the Oscar Mentelius Foundation to Dr. Anita Radini from the University of York in the United Kingdom. Congratulations. Dr. Radini is awarded this Early Career Achievement Prize on the grounds of the social innovation, interdisciplinarity, and international impact of her early career work. Dr. Radini was among the first archaeologists to recognize the potential of dental calculus in bioarchaeological research. She pioneered the concept of the human mouse as a dust trap with dental calculus, entrapping and preserving a lifetime signature of inhaled organic and inorganic debris. Her thesis demonstrated that the previously ignored substrate provides unique insights into the environment directly experienced by people during their lifetimes, exploring the living conditions and health in past societies. She has pursued this innovative research direction, developing and optimizing methods for recovering a range of microdebris from ancient materials. Dr. Radini's research is part of an interdisciplinary team of collaborators from across Europe and America in osteology, isotopic evidence, genomics, and many other scientific disciplines, preserving the vast but rapidly deteriorating Arctic archaeological heritage as a frontline focus in contemporary archaeology. Her previous work, conducted across broad geographical and temporal contexts, demonstrated the wide variety of particles that can be retrieved from dental calculus, identifying wood dust in Neanderthals from Spain as well as medieval Britons. Her work uncovered the international trade of medical and important species throughout Europe and from the New World. She has identified exposure to smoke and burnt debris such as microcharcoal and soot dating back to the Middle Pleistocene in Israel, including potentially the earliest evidence of exposure to smoke for the genus Homo. Dr. Radini has carefully scrutinized her identifications, accumulating bespoke reference collections to authenticate her finds and engaged in the scholarship of the research question by contextualizing the results within historical, environmental, and behavioral contexts. She is developing new methodologies to understand exposure to occupational pollutants and their links to health in past populations. She is also working with contemporary craftspeople, and by reliving the past, her work is helping to improve our understanding of health in modern and future societies. Her research expands our understanding of air pollutant exposures associated with traditional crafts production, often carried out within developing societies as a means of poverty alleviation. In view of all the above, Dr. Radini can be considered an outstanding early career researcher, fulfilling all the selection criteria, and is awarded the 2021 Early Career Achievement Prize of the Oscar Mentelius Foundation. Congratulations again.
Hello everyone, my name is Anita Radini. I am a bioarchaeologist at the Department of Archaeology of the University of York, and I'm actually recording this video from my home country, Italy. because this year the conference format is online. First of all, I would like to say that when I learned from the website and the news that the Oscar Montelius Foundation and the association were creating a prize to celebrate early career researchers and their achievements, I was really pleased. I think it's fantastic that there is a prize within the association to celebrate the contribution that early career researchers can make to archaeology and heritage as a whole, especially at a time like this one, where we really face very many challenges. So this is fantastic. I would also confess that not for a second, it never crossed my mind that someone would actually nominate me for this prize, and let alone that the association and the trustees of the Montelius Foundation would choose me as the receiver of this prize this year. So it is a great honor for me to receive this prize. I am truly happy. There are no words to describe my joy when I received the email that let me know that I was awarded this year prize. So I'm really, really grateful to the trustees, to the association, and to those who nominated me for selecting me this year. I also want to dedicate this prize to all early career researchers, especially at this time where we face many extra challenges to hold on to the job that we love. So to you all, best of luck and happy conference. Thank you ever so much again.
Well, congratulations to the winners. We are now coming to the end of the first part of the opening ceremony, again with Mark Korschai, who will play to us the Impromptu Opus number 142, number 2, in A-flat major by Franz Schubert. Afterwards, the incoming president of the EAA, Esther Banfi, will introduce today's keynote speaker, Henny Piezonka from Kiel University, who will talk to us about Neolithic cultural traits seen from a global perspective. And at this point, I would say goodbye to you. Have a nice meeting, enjoy the keynote, and enjoy the piano.
Thank you, Angelica, and thank you, Mark Gorschy, for this beautiful piano music. Verehrte Damen und Herren, dear colleagues, dear members, in normal times, the incoming president would stay close to invisible before the takeover, that is, the annual members' business meeting, and then, normally, the new president would talk to participants of the annual dinner first. The reason for these more welcome words for me, a still incoming president, is, of course, the virtual annual meeting. So let me say hello to everyone, half of it officially for the moment. It is a special occasion for me to get the chance to greet you from the annual venue here from Kiel. Since 2013, I have been working and living in Germany, so the venue in my chosen home country is warming. So greetings to all participants. Enjoy the sessions and social events from your armchair. Take an active part in the talks and discussions. Make notes for further considerations towards future publications, perhaps. But above all, do not forget to switch from the keyboards and fountain pens for a glass of good wine when the time comes to celebrate that there is no virus stronger than us, that we are able to overcome all difficulties, and in spite of all slings and arrows of fortitude, we have assembled together for a great and huge EAA annual meeting. I truly believe that the opening ceremony is such an event. You and I, have many occasions to change ideas now and hopefully in person in the future. I know you are near to 3,000 and you're still growing in number, but I shall strive to meet and chat with as many of you as possible. For now, I wish you that you can benefit from the coming days of the conference. Having said that, I am honored to shortly introduce our keynote speaker tonight, Henny Piezonka. Henny is currently junior professor for anthropological archaeology at Kiel University. Originally trained in archaeology, classics, and art history in Berlin and Glasgow, both her master thesis and her PhD dissertation were awarded esteemed science prizes. As a research associate, she worked at Bonn and Greifswald universities and at the German Archaeological Institute, conducting fieldwork in various regions across Europe. She is one of the founding principal investigators of the Cluster of Excellence, Roots, Social, Environmental, and Cultural Connectivity in Past Societies, and one of the PIs of the Collaborator Research Center 1266, Scales of Transformation. In research and teaching, Henny specializes for hunter-gatherer and pastoral studies across North Eurasia, above all Siberia, specifically regarding Neolithization processes and the development and dispersal of Neolithic traits. Her research explores long-term social, cultural, and economic dynamics connected to diverse lifeways in steppe, forest, and tundra environments. Her work brings together field-based archaeological research with ethno-archaeological work amongst contemporary hunter, fisher, and herder communities in order to reach diversified, ontologically informed understandings of people and their material world. Combining archaeology and anthropology with datasets of the 21st century standards, this opens one of the best avenues and has huge capacities to reinterpret this crucial period of the past. Some of us could follow her talk in the hunter-gatherer session this morning, while the more complete and diachronically unfolding story will come tonight. With that words, dear Henny, I pass the torch to you, please.
Hello, dear colleagues, dear Felipe, dear Esther, thank you very much for the kind words of introduction. Dear Johannes, yes, dear members of the EAA, dear colleagues and friends, I am very honored to read today's keynote lecture at this year's EAA opening ceremony. I hope all of you had already a lot of interesting participations in sessions. Also, some keynotes have already been read. Everybody is always, of course, complaining and very sorry that we're not able to meet here in person in Kiel. But actually, I realized one not so bad aspect of this virtual format, that you can switch between sessions much more easily and much more quickly. So there's one plus at least, I think. So the title of my talk today is Untying the Bundle, Neolithic Cultural Traits Seen from a Global Forager Perspective. And as we are not able to meet here in person in Kiel, I thought I would like to present you a little prelude to my topic, situating it within the Kiel and Northern German research environment, because as you have already heard, and many of you, of course, know from the community, Kiel and also other organizations involved in the organization of this year's EAA conference have actually a really long and strong history in both Neolithic research, but also Paleo and Mesolithic research, not only in this part of Germany, but across different parts of Europe and also internationally, and especially, as has been mentioned as well, in connection with thorough incorporation of natural sciences, of life sciences. And a third aspect I want to mention in this connection is that there's also new professorships actually strengthening also the cultural, anthropological and sociological aspect of archaeological inquiry and research, with my junior professorship, which has been mentioned already by Esther, which started in 2016, and with a new professorship which started in 2020 of Martin Vorholt on social archaeology. So I think this background here in Kiel, which you now will only, most of you will see only virtually, is, I think, a very good set out for a topic of a keynote lecture, which will in a way, comprehensively deal with current questions of this spectrum between Neolithic, hunter-gatherer, and anthropological research in current archaeology. So my talk will start with an introduction on this problematic, as I think, concept of the Neolithic and the Neolithization. Then I would like to go into some detailed discussion of certain aspects which are commonly related to the definition of the Neolithic and the Neolithization, namely technological innovations, economic intensification, and also socio-political complexity. Then I would like to have a little outlook on our Northern Central European region here. And in the end, I want to thematize the problem that terms make history, the role and also the agency of terminology in this respect, before opening some perspectives for future inquiry. So what is the Neolithic? There's, of course, in the long history of research, a lot of different ideas on the Neolithic, which are also rooted in very diverse and different scientific communities. For example, as Silviane Schaal wrote in 2015, I read it in German now, die Epoche, in der die produzierende Wirtschaftsweise einsetzt und sich schließlich auch durchsetzt. Or as Svetlana Oshipkina, a famous Russian Neolithic researcher, wrote in a handbook on the Neolithic, Therefore, only the ceramic vessels remain as an indicator for the determination of Neolithic monuments, and their appearance thus marks the beginning of the Neolithic. Or yet another view on the Neolithic by Fowler and his colleagues in 2015, the Neolithic as a form of social organization predicated on distinctive relations with things, places, and animals, competitive communities, and wealth. Or, as John Robb wrote in 2014, every generation gets the Neolithic it deserves. Also not a bad thought, I think. So, starting maybe from a Western Central European perspective, we see that this old concept of the Neolithic revolution, as coined already by Gordon Child, and the associated Neolithic cultural traits are still very much at the center of the understanding of the Neolithic in archaeology. This is exemplified, for example, by an exhibition which took place in Germany in 2015, which was named Revolution Jungsteinzeit. And the basis of this prevailing definition of the Neolithic in our region is really the introduction of animal husbandry and agriculture. So it's an economic innovation, which then is sort of complemented by a different set of traits, including, for example, sedentism, social inequality, the rise of monumentality, but also material aspects like pottery or more ideological or ideologically connotated aspects such as figurines, for example. But what is also clear, and what has been well shown over the last decades and years, is that actually a real package, a Neolithic bundle of such a set of traits is actually almost nowhere in the world existing. And these different parts of the bundle, as it has been defined in Europe, in parts of Europe, actually almost nowhere occur together, but everywhere in the world where you look, they form different sequences. In some cases, the pottery is the first. In other cases, there's a long period where plant cultivation is taking place, but no animal husbandry, and so on, which is quite nicely, I find, visualized in this picture by Dorian Fuller, for example, but also has been impressively shown by these maps by Detlev Kronenborn and Sylviane Schaal in this mentioned exhibition catalog. So, this Neolithic way of life, do we deal with an agri-centric construct? And again, I use here a visualization, which I find, well, it's a bit sort of, stark, but it sort of shows this problematic by Peter Hommel, showing this sort of evolutionary point of view from savagery via the Neolithic to civilization, which sort of keeps lingering on explicitly or non-explicitly in archaeological thought. For example, you can find in textbooks, in archaeological textbooks, accordingly certain ideas such as, for example, after the agricultural revolution, in most trajectories of development, we see the development of communities with leaders and followers, where the high ranks often became hereditary. Such progressivist views, like exemplified by this rather old picture, I admit, by Marek Svelebil, which has been reproduced also in textbooks, there is a suggestion of a linear evolution from simple to complex. And the complex part then is often combined or seen in combination with this transition to productive economy. But as we all know, this in a way, persisting view on the Neolithic has been starkly critiqued. And I want to just show you here one example by Jean Arnold and her colleagues, who wrote, "The problem is the technological determinism that situates farming as foundational to everything complex. Complex non-farming groups are ignored because they fail to conform to entrenched beliefs that only an agricultural economy can support advances such as inherited status, village living, and formalized leadership in control of non-kin labor." So, in sort of this, if you look at this problematic field from that perspective, one could state that non-agriculturalists, in a way, often remain people without history, to use a phrase by Derek Wolfe. And alternatives, as have been, for example, expressed nicely, I find, by Peter Jordan and Vicky Cummins and Marek Svelebil in their big handbook on the anthropology and archaeology of hunter-gatherers, would view or suggest a view from a hunter-gatherer perspective, as it was them who were the great innovators and the driving force in some of the most important cultural transformations to affect global humanity. This is an important point because many of these Neolithic traits actually have been invented, so to say, found, reached by hunter-gatherers. And so, if we come back to the Neolithic bundle, as critically assessed by this paper by Chilingurolu, we see several aspects which play a role in this concept. There are technological aspects, as I mentioned already, pottery and so on, the economical aspects, the animal husbandry and plant cultivation, ideological aspects, as well as the socio-political sphere. And now I would like to bring you through some of them from a more or less hunter-gatherer point of view perspective. And for this, I would like to discuss some examples from all over the world, as you can see, mainly Northern Hemisphere, but not only. And I would like to start with a closer look on this aspect of technological innovation. This nice graph, which was prepared by Sven Hansen and his team in the Atlas of Innovation, shows a lot of innovations which were important in European prehistory, and one of them is the pottery as connected to the Neolithization processes in Europe. But if we look, for example, across the Eurasian continent, we see that early pottery is by no means an invention of farmers, but it actually has 10,000 years of history before any farming communities were using any pottery vessels. The earliest pottery we know at the moment in the world stems from southern China, from cave sites, and is dated to around 18,000 years calibrated BC. And between this Eastern Asian center and the Baikal Lake, there's many find spots, many sites which have produced Pleistocene glacial pottery. And also further west, if we sort of follow the trajectory towards Europe, we see early Holocene hunter-gatherer pottery, which is completely independent of any farming economy. And actually here in Kiel, in northern Germany, we have one of the westernmost examples of this hunter-gatherer pottery sphere, the Ertebölle culture, or as it's called, Ertebölle-Ellerbeck, which is a part of, Ellerbeck is actually part of Kiel. So we are actually here quite in the center of this discussion as well from geographical point of view. It's not only Eurasia where hunter-gatherer pottery exists, but in other parts of the world as well. Here you see two examples from Northern America, which interestingly, as I find, actually display a form very common also in Eurasian hunter-gatherer pottery, a sort of bag-shaped with a conical base. So Peter Jordan and his team has tried to understand this big complex of hunter-gatherer pottery through modeling based on radiocarbon dates. And here you see the result as it was published in 2016, which seems to suggest a bipolar expansion of early pottery, the old center in the Far East, as which I mentioned already, and another center in Africa, north of the Sahara, where earliest pottery also appears 10,000 calibrated BC. And in this model, if we sort of do a modeling with these two poles, we actually see that the early pottery of farming communities, for example, after the pre-pottery Neolithic in the Near East, but also in the early groups in Europe, are actually at a sort of border frontier situation between these two poles of pottery dispersals as they can be modeled. This is still work in progress as well and needs better resolution of radiocarbon dates. But what I want to show you here, pottery as an innovation is a hunter-gatherer innovation. The next topic I would like to zoom in on is the economic intensification, which is also an aspect closely related to definitions of the Neolithic. But again, we would like to take a look at this complex from a hunter-gatherer perspective. What is important, not only for hunter-gatherers, but for any human, is food availability year-round. And already in 1982, Alan Testard, in his famous paper on storage among hunter-gatherers, systematized the aspects which are important in this respect, namely the abundance of resources, efficient food acquisition, seasonality of resources, and food storage techniques. So research management and storage are very important for certain aspects, such as settlement patterns, namely mobility versus sedentism, population density, and socioeconomic inequality. And, oops, sorry, it was the wrong one. Looking at this complex from the hunter-gatherer perspective, we see that it's not only storage in big silos which is playing a role here, but actually there is another concept which is very important for hunter-gatherer lifeways, which was named by Nurul David, a famous anthropologist. Nature is a bank, and the topic is actually that of natural storage or resource storage, as it was named by Ole Grön, for example, meaning that regular seasonal mobility cycles or also sedentary lifeways are based on the predictable abundance of various resources. So it's not that you have to collect stuff and store it, but actually you can also use nature as a storage when you know exactly the seasonal cycle, for example, as shown here for an Evenki life cycle in this illustration, when you know when and where which resources are abundant and can be harvested. And this feeds into this concept of the nurturing landscapes, which was coined by Vladimir Adaev, a Russian anthropologist, which also means this provision of reliable resources to this community. And let me illustrate this with the example of fishing. So this natural storage and also active storage can include migratory fish. So salmon, for example, in Northwest Coast America is a very, but also in the Far East, is a very reliable resource which appears every year almost in huge amounts and can be harvested. The same is the case with winter refugia for fish in the periods. There are also recurring periods of oxygen shortage in certain water bodies, as is, for example, the case in many Siberian water systems. But then there's also the active preservation through drying, smoking, fermenting, and freezing, which also plays a role in hunter-gatherer lifeways. And very important, but sometimes not very well traceable with archaeological means, is the transformation in high-energy, well-storable products, for example, fish meal or fish oils. There's also active resource management possible in hunter-gatherer lifeways, such as temporary keeping of fish, for example, in artificial ponds or river sections. And you see how, in my two illustrations, how similar actually the solutions can be, which are reached for such mass harvesting strategies. You see one example of a huge fish fence of the Khanty in Western Siberia and an almost identical construction of the Coast Salish in Northwest America. And let me explain the same mechanisms for fouling as well, which is actually a part of subsistence strategies, which is in my opinion, maybe a little bit underrepresented in archaeological thinking. Again, with the waterfowl, but also forest fowl, natural storage is provided because they are also seasonal occurrences of duck species, for example, but also of the forest birds. Again, active storage is also possible, for example, and it's attested to by ethnohistorical and ethnographic data. You can freeze them, you can dry the birds, and you have, in some cases, really very stable provisions which can last the whole winter in some cases. And the same is the case with the active resource management also for birds. For example, through landscape shaping, hunter-gatherer communities can open corridors in certain geographical locations to guide flying ducks, which can then be caught by nets, for example, or forest fowl can be attracted to traps, as you see in my illustrations from Siberia here, by sand and pebbles, which they like to eat in order to help their digestion. And actually, this can even be sometimes found archaeologically. On the right picture, you see such a crop of a forest grouse in an Iron Age house pit, as it is showing all the stones which this bird has been eating. The connection of resource abundance and social complexity is well studied and well attested, and I just would like to show you this one example of the Chumash in California, whose economy is based on a huge abundance of acorns, but also of marine resources, and they have developed as attested to by the time of the European colonization, sedentary villages, hereditary leader positions, shell money, and also long-distance trade connections. The domestication of plants and animals, of course, plays a big role in the determination or like the definition of the Neolithic. But domestication can also be of animals in this case not related to subsistence economy, but domesticated animals can also be kept by, apart from the dog, of course, by communities which are entirely living as hunter-gatherer fishers. This is the case with reindeer, with domesticated and kept reindeer in Siberian communities, while there is actual pastoral herding in the tundra, which is a real like herding community. In the taiga, you have groups which are living as foragers, but have reindeer for transport, for either sledge transport for in the winter to aid communication, but also hunting, or riding and pack animals, as is the case further east with the Evenki, for example. So the reindeer domestication is actually an interesting special case. And here in Kiel, we have within our excellence cluster of roots, we have a PhD project dealing with this taiga reindeer, human reindeer systems and their archaeological implications as well. And here you see pictures which have been taken just 3 weeks ago in Siberia, because we were able to go there for the first time after a whole year of not being able to work with our colleagues and partners there. So the last thematic point in my lecture will be dealing with socio-political complexity as one of the markers discussed for the Neolithization and Neolithic topic. Instead of these hierarchical communities and societies which are seen as complex societies, there's also alternatives. There's alternatives which can be studied in the ethnohistorical record, but also in archaeological communities. For example, we have acephalous and heterarchical alternatives to hierarchical societal structures. One famous example is the Coast Salish in the northwest coast region of North America, with their pear-shaped societal structure instead of the typical hierarchical pyramid, and who also have embodied but also physical markers of the social differentiation. For example, skull deformation, but also house size are marking these different layers of the society. And war was used as a leveling practice. Leveling mechanisms are a very important aspect for understanding the social mechanisms of the social structure of communities, and it's very important to bear that in mind. That not every society is always striving to these hierarchical structures, but there's also real very elaborated mechanisms to counteract that and to actually keep societies more equal. Among these leveling mechanisms, as for example summarized by Clastres in his famous writings about this, would be public disgrace, violence, the option of voting with your feet, but also feastings. And the result of such mechanisms would be a relatively equal distribution of material possessions, but also the active restriction of centralized resource control. And our Kiel colleagues here, around Maria Wunderlich, but also Johannes Müller and others, together with colleagues from the Roman Germanic division of the German Archaeological Institute, have just recently published a paper on their study on megaliths and their connection to such leveling mechanisms in India, in Nagaland. Another aspect feeding into this aspect of socio-political complexity concerns the rise of territoriality and its connection to conflict and emerging inequality. And in Western Siberia, we have a very peculiar situation that at the time when in Western Europe and Central Europe, the Neolithization with the expansion of agricultural, of farming communities, in this case really expansion of the linear band pottery groups, took place. In this region, as you see here in the map, on the map between Urals and the Yenisei, a different type of bundle appeared around the 8.2 event, which is an interesting coincidence which we still have to investigate further. A bundle among the gatherer societies, which includes the first fortified settlements, possibly the first ones actually in the world, together with pottery, with a peculiar site type named Cholme. So these are ritual mounds, which the role of which is not really well understood at the moment, and further aspects also of the economical intensification. So we have an alternative bundle in this region, which obviously is related to some type of territoriality, but also conflict. And the interesting thing is that in Western Siberia, in this region, these fortified hunter-gatherer sites persist through time. We have them in the Neolithic, in the Bronze Age, in the Iron Age, up until the time of the Russian colonization in the 16th century. And this aspect is in Western Siberia, which is really early, is not well understood, and we are conducting further research in this. But it's interesting to look at other incidences of hunter-gatherer fortification and terraforming in the world, all of which are much, much later than what we observe in Siberia. But nonetheless, we have hunter-gatherer fortresses also in the Russian Far East, and terraforming and defensive banks also in, for example, Northwest America. But as I said, many millennia later. And what is interesting is that these hunter-gatherer fortifications seem to coincide often with mass harvesting and active management strategies of aquatic resources like fish and mollusks. So also in our roots cluster of social inequality, we have another PhD student trying to investigate these aspects on a statistical basis for the Western Siberian region. So the Neolithization in northern Central Europe is an interesting aspect to discuss. This sort of interface between hunter-gatherer and farming societies, because we see here a situation with parallel and transitional societies. As you know, the Neolithization, so the spreading of farming into Europe, had a rather arrhythmic course, and it is characterized by an alternation of phases of rapid expansion and stagnation episodes. And one of the stagnation lines is actually just at the northern fringe of the mountainous regions south of the North European flatlands. So in our region, actually. And a new study, which just appeared in a preprint, actually tries to link by modeling these stagnation phases to climatic influences, namely to the quality of the growing season, which is quite an interesting idea, I find. And it again illustrates these fuzzy transitions, the interlocking of and fluctuation between different economic approaches, namely productive economy and a more foraging-orientated economy. And the character and the persistence of these parallel and transitional societies for a long time can also be traced, for example, by isotopic studies, which would illustrate the way people, the nutrition and the food cultures of the people in question. Here is a study by Thomas Terberger and also the colleagues from Kiel, where bulk isotopic analysis of more than 50 human skeletal remains from the Mesolithic to the early Bronze Age were investigated for our region here in northern Germany. And what we see, especially if you look to the right-hand side graph, that for in the 4th and early, even up until the early 3rd millennium, calibrated BC, very diverse subsistence strategies existed. And some of these individuals, which are sort of portrayed here by these orange dots, even if they were buried in, or their remains were buried in megalithic tombs, still might have a very marine diet. And it's only in the beginning of the Bronze Age, really, and in the very last period of the Neolithic, that the subsistence strategy becomes more streamlined towards the dominance of farming economies. So again, one more slide with Kiel results and Kiel studies by Ingo Feser and Walter Dorfler and others, who very nicely over the last years, again by a very multidisciplinary and multi-proxy approach, including soil sciences, palynology, and so on, are very clearly able to show now how this transitional period, with all its fluctuations, persisted for many centuries, also here in the north, before agriculture could really take over. So, terms make history. That's my next topic I find rather important, actually, in connection with the Neolithic. So zooming out again from northern Germany onto the world map, we see that the Neolithic across the globe is very much influenced by different Denkstile and Denkkollektive in the sense of Ludwig Fleck and the scientific communities and their histories. So, for example, as I said, in the former Soviet Union and the areas which belong to it, pottery is the only criterion which demarcates the onset of the Neolithic within hunter-gatherer societies. Whereas in our region, in Europe, food production through domestication is the main criterion. In America, the name Neolithic is actually not very much used, but its equivalent would be the Archaeicum, which is characterized, for example, in North America by horticulture, pottery, and mounds, and in South America by arable fields and agriculture developing from them with sedentism and emerging social complexity. So, these different ideas of what the Neolithic is and these different understandings of this term actually also influence the research itself. It influences the research questions which are posed, but also the outcomes. And I would like to illustrate this situation just with two examples. One of these problematic fields concerns the problematic contextualization of a region, for example. The paper I outline here with the title, "The Neolithic Transition in the Baltic Was Not Driven by Admixture of Early European Farmers," is actually, it was a high-impact paper, but the question is posed wrongly because, of course, the Eastern Neolithic, which is defined as hunter-gatherers with pottery, is not connected to European farmers by default. So that very impactful headline is actually hollow in a way. And the other example illustrates how research questions and approaches have been developed out of the terminology. This is a case, for example, with this term aquatic Neolithic, which has been used by several colleagues over the last years in order to find a term for these changes in hunter-gatherer communities, which the researchers try to link to the Neolithization and to the Neolithic, so terms like aquatic Neolithic, where the aquatic resources replace, in a way, the agriculture are sought. And together with Kako Nordqvist in the Bern EAA, we actually took a whole talk on this, illustrating it with much more examples, how people struggle with this complex terminological discrepancy between these different schools of thought and scientific communities. And it's not solved, unfortunately. So what are the perspectives on our Neolithic bundle? What can be a future Neolithic? I think we have to concentrate more on diversity, on social dynamics, and on interaction. So what is leading to a better understanding of the historical processes would be bottom-up models, for example, by taking into view various local and regional developments and strands, by investigating niche construction strategies, but also the role of decision-making of the people themselves, as John Robb has stressed, but also top-down models, for example, to identify processes with tipping points, with points of no return, as have been explained, for example, by Bill Finlayson and Graham Warren in a very seminal written publication, but also to not forget about states of equilibrium and stability, and not mistake them as mere phases of stagnation, but maybe take a more positive stance also to such solutions within the socio-political dynamics. And also to take into account economy-independent platforms of societal dynamics, as has been put forward by Jean Arnold and her colleagues, for example, agency and authority, social differentiation, participation in communal venues, and so on. So, what is necessary, I would say, is an increased focus on the interaction dynamics, and this is already taking place. I mean, Johannes has also mentioned part of it. We will have to look at parallel societies. We will have to investigate transitional societies and also translocal societies, as described by Martin Vorholt, for example. We will have to look at mobility, but also take into account more clearly symbiotic relations between hunter-gatherers and farmers, if you want to stick with these terms by now. Alternative ontologies also need to be taken into account in order to better understand other worlds, for example, multi-species worlds, non-human kinship, alternative non-linear time concepts, and so on, which might have been part of the worlds of the past, strange societies which we are investigating. And to summarize this, one of the imperatives I would think is we have to overcome the ethnocentrism and the focus on farming, and with that, the evolutionist and extractionist values connected to it. And I would like to finish this train of thought with a quote from Philippe Descola and his seminal book, Beyond Nature and Culture, where he wrote, "But there is now more to gain from trying to situate our own exotism as one particular case within a general grammar of cosmologies, rather than continuing to attribute to our own vision of the world the value of a standard by which to judge the manner in which thousands of civilizations have managed to acquire some obscure inkling of that vision." So before my final slide, I want to announce two conferences actually, which partly take up this thread, which I have tried to describe here. One of them will take place in November here in Kiel. It's called the Boas Talks, and it's a conference in which we want to commemorate Franz Boas's 140th jubilee of his PhD, which he, not so well known actually, finished here in Kiel. This father of the four-field anthropology in America actually was a student of Kiel and a graduate of our university, and it's timely to commemorate this with a conference with a lot of international participants, and another conference where especially this hunter-gatherer perspective will be at length and anthropologically and archaeologically discussed is the JAX conference in Dublin 2022, the conference on hunting and gathering societies. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I wish you a nice continuation and many insightful lectures, sessions, and discussions with your colleagues. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have to speak to the mic. Thank you, Henny, so much for this exciting, well, it's more than a lecture, full of intriguing ideas. I'm sure everyone has, or many of us have, many questions and comments to that, but the opening talks are normally left without a discussion. So all I ask from you is that please keep your questions and keep your curiosity for the upcoming days. And as Henny said, enjoy the rest of the days. With these words, I think all of us agrees that the opening ceremony of the annual meeting in Kiel was properly done. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much who made it possible for us to have this opening ceremony as a hybrid meeting. And I would like to remind you that this is the very first hybrid event in the history of EAA, and I can only congratulate to the technical staff, to the Prague colleagues, and everyone who participated in this success. Don't forget about a glass of red wine, white wine, please. There is no wine reception, but you can do it individually. Enjoy and have a good night.